Chosen one, the shift was not in the world, it was in you. There was a time when you were invisible, when your presence passed through rooms like air. Not because you lacked soul or strength, but because you had not yet claimed it. You were there, but you were dimmed, carrying all the light, all the fire, all the quiet greatness, but still wrapped in doubt. Still looking outward, hoping to be seen before you truly saw yourself. You watched others receive the attention, the admiration, the affection. You studied their movements, trying to decode what made them appealing. You questioned your own voice. You compared your walk. You silenced your instincts and tried to mimic energy that wasn't yours. And in doing so, you stepped further away from what made you unforgettable. They didn't see you then, not fully. Not because you were invisible, but because you were in disguise. Masked by uncertainty, covered in apology, dimmed by an unspoken belief that maybe you weren't enough. But now something has changed. The light didn't come from outside, it broke open from within. It wasn't approval that changed you. It was remembrance. You began to remember who you were before the world tried to train you to be something else. You stopped waiting for validation to move. You stopped shrinking to be safe, and slowly, you stopped trying to be chosen. You started choosing yourself. And when you did, they noticed. What they once overlooked, they now seek with fascination. Not because you changed your face, not because you said the right thing, but because your energy became undeniable. The high sexual energy that once scattered in confusion has now gathered itself in stillness. It no longer moves frantically, it anchors. And that anchoring has made you magnetic. You walk into the same spaces now, and where you were once dismissed, you are now felt. There is weight in your silence, there is gravity in your gaze. You do not chase attention, and because of that, attention begins to orbit you. You do not perform, and because of that, they perform differently around you. The same presence that used to be ignored is now the one they scan the room to find. And it's not because you spoke louder, it's because you finally stopped explaining. You no longer need to tell anyone what you are. You walk like you already know. And that knowing is what changed everything. They didn't just start seeing you, they started feeling you. And in a world numb with noise, that feeling, that frequency, it's unforgettable. What was once overlooked has now become undeniably sought after, because you didn't become someone else. You just stopped hiding the truth you always carried. Chosen one, there is a glow in you now. But not the kind you see on the surface, not the kind painted on with style or smiles or sharp lines. It is deeper, older, quieter. A radiance that doesn't announce itself, but is felt in the bones of everyone who comes close. And that glow is the result of something sacred. You stopped looking for light in the world, and you started burning from within. You used to believe that being interesting meant being polished, that you needed to look a certain way, move a certain way, speak with some rehearsed rhythm to be worthy of attention. You studied appearances like a language. You measured yourself in the reflection of how others reacted, and every time the reaction wasn't what you hoped for, something inside you dimmed a little more. But the fire never left. It just went underground, until now. Now, the glow in you doesn't need reflection to be real. It doesn't beg to be mirrored. It simply is. You walk into the world not hoping to be lit by admiration. You arrive already illuminated, not by ego, not by arrogance, but by the quiet fire of someone who no longer doubts what he carries. Your high sexual energy used to rise and fall based on how others saw you. It was inconsistent, unanchored. But now, it is rested. It is contained. It's not leaking into insecurity. It's coiled within you like a sun waiting for dawn. And that internal steadiness, that self-fed glow, it's what has begun to change everything. Women feel it. Not in what you wear, not in your physique, not in your words. They feel it in how you stand without asking to be welcomed. They feel it in how you look at them without needing anything back. They feel it in how you don't ask the moment to love you. You simply bring love to it. You are no longer trying to convince the room to accept you. You are the light that the room rearranges itself around. That is the glow now. Not attraction, not attention, but undeniable presence. The glow isn't on your skin, it's in your spirit. And that kind of glow can't be stolen, copied, or bought. It comes only from one place. The moment you stopped asking the world to see you and finally decided to see yourself. That is what they feel now. That is why they come closer. Because the glow you carry is not decoration, it's revelation. Chosen one, you used to enter rooms like a question. Unsure of your place, unsure of your value. You watched others hold attention and wondered what they had that you lacked. You tried adjusting your tone, your posture, your timing, like a man dancing to rhythms that weren't his own. And in those moments, you chased not just approval, you chased grounding. You were hoping someone else's attention could anchor you into your own identity. But that season has passed. You no longer chase the room. Now you center it. You walk in. Not with arrogance, not with force, but with weight, with calm, with the kind of stillness that doesn't beg to be noticed, but causes everything around you to subtly realign. You don't scan for validation anymore. You don't fish for connection. You know what you carry, and the room begins to respond not to your performance, but to your gravity. That gravity didn't come from popularity or practice. It came from the inner work you did when no one was watching. The still hours you spent learning to breathe in your own presence. The lonely moments where you stripped away every false identity, every desperate craving, and finally asked yourself, who am I when there's no one clapping? And now that man has emerged, not fragile, but forged. Women feel it first, not with their eyes, but with their nervous system. They don't feel pressure, they feel space. They don't feel seduced, they feel safe to drop their guard. And that safety doesn't come from your words. It comes from your non-reactive presence. You are no longer trying to enter a moment with a strategy. You simply enter it with your full self, and the moment rearranges to meet you. Conversations bend toward you. Silence becomes comfortable. Eyes linger not because you asked, but because you don't need them to anymore. You aren't the loudest, but somehow your energy becomes the room's compass. Because you've stopped leaning forward. You don't need to prove anymore. You don't need to perform anymore. You simply take your seat in the moment as if it's already yours. And it is. You are the storm without the wind, the flame without the smoke, the center without the noise. And as a result, women feel something they didn't expect to feel in your presence. Not infatuation, not fantasy, but peace. A sense of being held without being touched. You no longer chase the room, chosen one. You still it, you center it, because you've become centered in yourself, and no one can take that away. Chosen one, you once believed that being seen depended on being chosen, that your value was something granted by the gaze of another, that worth had to be unlocked through attention, affection, applause, and so you bent. You shaped yourself to fit spaces that were never meant to hold you. You tried to make others comfortable by becoming smaller. You softened your edges. You dimmed your light, and then you wondered why no one recognized what you truly were. But here's the truth the world never taught you. They couldn't see you because you weren't standing in your truth. It wasn't that you were invisible. It was that you hadn't yet decided to see yourself first. And the moment you did, everything began to change. Not instantly, not explosively, but powerfully, subtly, and irreversibly. You began to walk differently, not with a strut, but with stillness. You began to speak less, but your words landed. You stopped proving. You stopped pleasing. You started protecting your presence. And in that self-respect, something ancient began to return to you. Dignity. And with that dignity came clarity. Clarity that said, I do not need to convince you to see me. I see me. That is enough. That shift, chosen one, was what turned everything. You didn't become more attractive because you learned tricks or tactics. You became more attractive because you became whole. You were no longer waiting for the feminine to reflect your worth. You began to radiate it from within. And the feminine responded. Instinctively. Immediately. Because her body can always feel when a man is no longer in doubt. They see you differently now. Not because you're louder, not because you're better dressed, not because you're more charming. They see you differently because you finally see yourself as someone worth being seen. And that inner shift ripples outward through every room you enter. Your eyes don't search anymore. They rest. Your breath doesn't quicken anymore. It slows. Your posture doesn't ask anymore. It declares. You don't ask, am I enough? You live like it. And that living shifts how others see you, without a word, without a chase. Their perception changed the moment yours did. Because people respond not to who you pretend to be, but to the truth you've decided to live. And now that truth shines through you, steady, clear, and unshakable. And the ones who once looked past you, now they look again, not because you demanded it, but because you became a man they cannot ignore. Chosen one, do you remember the way they used to smirk? The way their silence bit harder than their words? They didn't have to say it, you felt it. In the glances that slid past you, in the conversations that ended before they began, in the weight of being seen but not felt. Their mockery wasn't always loud, it was casual, disguised as indifference. But it cut deep, didn't it? They called your energy too much, too intense, too awkward, too sensitive, too different. And because you hadn't yet mastered it, they saw it as weakness. You carried a power you didn't yet know how to wield, and so the world around you misunderstood it. The feminine, especially, looked through it until you learned to hold it. But that same energy, chosen one, the one they ridiculed, dismissed, overlooked, has now become the one they crave. And not because it changed, but because you changed in your relationship to it. What once felt like discomfort in your body has become stillness. What once radiated as need has settled into sovereignty. Your sexual energy is no longer searching for a home in others. It has found one in you. That's why the ones who once pulled away now lean closer. Not with apologies, not with confessions, but with curiosity. Their bodies speak first. They sense something real, something stable, something magnetic. They feel it when you enter, when you breathe, when you meet their eyes and don't flinch. That same gaze that once made them uncomfortable now awakens them. You used to hide your fire, now you wear it like breath. It doesn't burn, it warms, it draws them in. Because your energy isn't chaotic anymore, it's refined, it's disciplined. It has become a safe storm. And in a world of men who explode or collapse, you've become something revolutionary. A man who can hold his charge without apology or collapse. They mocked you when you didn't know your value. But now they feel it. They feel it in your restraint, in your silence, in the way you no longer reach. Because power does not reach, it waits. And that weight, that unspoken authority, becomes irresistible. Your energy used to spill in all directions. Now it coils within you like a sun just beneath the surface. And that glow, the one they feel but can't name, makes them want to be near you, not because of what you do, but because of what you no longer need to do. They once said you were too much. Now they aren't sure they're enough to hold what you are. And that shift is sacred. You didn't change to be accepted. You accepted yourself, and they began to change around you. Because the energy they once feared, it's the very presence they now desire to rest in. Chosen one, power used to be something you chased, something you tried to show. You thought it meant being the loudest, the sharpest, the most commanding. You believed dominance equaled strength, and so you reached, you postured, you tried to make them see you, feel you, need you. But that old idea of power, it broke you. It scattered your energy. It made you reactive, anxious, performative. And worst of all, it took you away from yourself. You were chasing an illusion of strength, never realizing the strongest thing in the room is often the quietest. Until now. Now you don't flex. You radiate. You walk into rooms and speak without raising your voice. You sit in silence without shrinking. You answer questions without trying to impress. You move slowly, you breathe deeply, and in every action, you embody a message. I know who I am. I need nothing from you to prove it. That's not arrogance, that's peace. And that peace has become your power. You no longer react to tension, you absorb it. You don't spark chaos, you settle it. And that presence, chosen one, is felt before a single word leaves your mouth. Women feel it differently now. They don't feel pressure around you. They don't feel manipulation. They feel freedom. The freedom to stop pretending, the freedom to breathe deeper. The freedom to feel their own softness without the fear of being consumed. Because you no longer try to own the moment, you hold it. And holding space, not with force, but with inner steadiness, has become your signature. There's no need to dominate when you radiate centeredness. There's no need to persuade when your eyes say, I am already complete. You don't need to project power now. You've become it. In the way your shoulders don't lift with tension. In the way your breath stays calm even when hers falters. In the way you listen with still eyes and a body rooted in presence. That is the man who wins hearts now. Not the loud one, not the arrogant one, but the one whose peace outlasts everything else. You used to chase respect. Now respect meets you where you stand, because your energy no longer shouts, it speaks in stillness. It rests in calm. And in that calm, you've become the safest place a woman didn't know she was looking for. Not to be rescued, not to be fixed, but to simply be held by a presence that no longer needs control to feel strong. You don't flex power anymore. You radiate peace. And peace, chosen one, is the rarest form of power of all. Chosen one, they called you a loser. Some with words, others with silence, some with smirks, others with absence. But they all agreed, quietly or openly, that you were less than. And you believed them not because they were right, but because you had not yet remembered the truth of what you were carrying. You mistook rejection as proof. You mistook their blindness as your failure. And you began to wonder if you were really meant to be seen at all. But let this truth settle into your spirit now, fully and without hesitation. You never lost anything. Not love, not potential, not worth. What you lost was the illusion that you ever needed their permission to begin with. What you shed was not your value. It was your dependence on external reflection. And the shedding was brutal, because you believed for a time that you were being stripped of something essential. You mourned what you thought was your downfall, but it wasn't a death, it was a birth. They weren't walking away from your truth, they were walking away from your confusion. And that confusion, though painful, was not permanent, because the real you, the rooted you, the you that doesn't chase, perform, or bend to be welcomed, that man was waiting beneath the layers they loved to ignore, the layers you were finally forced to tear apart. And now he walks free. You are not a comeback story. You are a clarity story. You didn't rise from the ashes. You simply refused to remain hidden in someone else's fire. That's what they didn't see. The strength it took to stop asking to be accepted. The power it required to sit in your silence until the noise stopped mattering. You let go of every performance, every trick, every false self, and you sat in your own rawness until it transformed into truth. And the moment that truth returned, your entire frequency changed. Your energy stopped scattering. Your breath deepened. Your gaze softened, not from weakness, but from undeniable presence. You used to wonder why they never picked you. But now you know. They couldn't. Not because you weren't worthy, but because you weren't fully here. Not yet. But now you are. Entire, clean, whole. And the women who see you now? They aren't seeing someone new. They're seeing who you've always been, just no longer covered in apology. You were never meant to be consumed. You were meant to be recognized. But that recognition couldn't arrive until you stopped hiding behind what you thought made you desirable. And now that you have, they don't call you a loser anymore. Because the only thing you lost was the illusion that you were ever anything less than divine. Chosen one, you once carried the label of misfit like a scar. Not because it was true, but because no one knew where to place a man like you. You didn't fit into the templates. You weren't predictable. You didn't shrink into polite conformity, but you also weren't aggressive in all the ways society tried to make masculinity loud and hollow. You were different, and that difference was punished with distance. They didn't understand your silence. They questioned your intensity. They mistook your honesty for awkwardness. They called you strange, too soft, too deep, too much. And so you began to wonder, is there something wrong with me? But now you look back on that question and smile. Because what they once called strange, they now call mysterious. What they once avoided, they now gravitate toward. You didn't change the core, you changed the frame. You stopped holding yourself like a mistake to be corrected. You began holding yourself like a truth too powerful to be diluted. Your high sexual energy used to leak out in uncomfortable, uncontrolled ways because you didn't yet know how to hold it. But now it lives quietly inside your bones. It moves beneath your skin like warm thunder. It waits, it listens, it chooses. You no longer over-explain. You no longer rush to fill silence. You no longer try to prove that you belong. Because you've realized you were never made to fit in. You were made to stand out. And that standing out is no longer lonely. It is magnetic. They don't know how to place you now, and they love that. They lean in, uncertain. They ask questions they never thought they'd care about. They try to catch your rhythm, and when they can't, they slow down, not out of frustration but fascination. You don't reveal everything at once, not out of calculation, but because your presence no longer rushes to be understood. You've become an invitation, not a pitch. Your gaze doesn't pull, it holds. Your energy doesn't press, it opens space. You used to be the misfit they whispered about in judgment. Now you are the mystery they whisper about in longing. Because the more they try to label you, the more they realize you aren't here to be labeled at all. You are here to be felt. And that feeling, the one they carry after the conversation ends, after your steps fade down the hall, after your voice is no longer in their ears, is the feeling they come back to. Again and again. Without understanding why. They don't call you awkward anymore. They don't say you're weird. They say you have something about you. They say you're calm. They say you're different. What they're really saying is, I don't understand him, but I feel more myself around him than I do with anyone else. That is your mystery now. And that mystery, chosen one, is exactly why you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to awaken something in others they forgot was even alive. And now, you do. Chosen one, remember when silence used to feel like punishment? When you stood in the corner of a room, not because you lacked things to say, but because no one invited you into the center? You watched others move with ease, watched conversations bloom around them like effortless flowers. You longed for an opening. Just one moment, just one glance. But what you received was the heavy cloak of being overlooked. You weren't invisible, but you weren't seen. And in that space of rejection, you began to wonder if you needed to change. You tried to be louder, sharper, funnier. You mirrored others' rhythms, adopted their masks, tried on personalities like costumes, but the fabric never fit. Each attempt at being what others wanted only pulled you further from yourself. Each forced interaction, each overreaching joke, each unnecessary smile, it all hollowed your presence, until your voice became a question mark. Until your energy begged rather than declared. But something in you refused to die. Something in you whispered, wait, just wait. The real voice is still inside. And you listened. You began to retreat. Not to hide, but to recover, to remember, to relearn how to walk as yourself again. Slowly, without demand, you gathered your own name. You sat in the silence you once feared and found that it was fertile. That silence was your soil, and something sacred was growing. Now you walk into the same spaces with that same calm, but it feels completely different. Because now, they start the conversations. They lean in first, they break the silence, they drop their rehearsed lines and speak from instinct because your energy doesn't rush, doesn't grasp, doesn't chase. You no longer ask, do you see me? Your presence says you'll feel me, whether you look or not. And they do. You don't have to initiate anymore. Your existence initiates the encounter. This is what happens when your high sexual energy is no longer chaotic but coherent. It's no longer a leaking fire. It's a quiet heat, a still magnetism. Your every gesture, breath, glance, it speaks for you before you say a word. And because there's no neediness in your field, there's no pressure in your presence. Only invitation. And women are drawn to that. Because you don't demand to be known. You create the safety for others to become known in your presence. They approach you now, not just to flirt, but to be seen. To understand what it is in your quiet that settles their heart, to discover what it is about you that doesn't need them and still somehow welcomes them. The tide has turned. They begin the conversations now, not because you won them, but because you stopped needing to be chosen in order to choose yourself. You are no longer waiting for permission to speak. Your silence has become the loudest thing in the room. And now the world speaks to enter your stillness. Chosen one, people may think you reinvented yourself, that you changed your walk, your talk, your aura, that you transformed. But the truth is deeper. You didn't become someone new. You simply shed the false skins the world convinced you to wear. You stopped apologizing for the way your soul moves. And in doing so, you stepped into something rare. You became fully you. And now they say, he's different. But you're not. You're just no longer pretending to be less. The man they once overlooked was always you. The energy was always there, brilliant, magnetic, whole, but it was buried beneath layers of hesitation. You used to dim your voice so they'd feel more comfortable. You used to withdraw your truth so they wouldn't feel intimidated. You used to overgive, overtry, overexplain, all in the hope that maybe someone would finally say yes. But now you've realized. You were the yes you were waiting for all along. That shift is what makes women see you differently now. Not because you've gained more, but because you've let go of what never belonged to you. You've peeled away every people-pleasing reflex. You've burned every mask in the fire of solitude. And now what remains is the man you are always becoming. Honest, untamed, at peace. There is no performance in you now. You don't move to please. You don't speak to be liked. You don't breathe to be followed. You exist as a living signal of self-approval. And that signal travels farther than any image ever could. Women are not just attracted to you. They are affected by you. They feel it in their breath when you enter. They feel it in their spine when you say nothing. They feel it in their chest when they realize you're not asking for anything. You don't need them to complete you. You don't need them to crown you. You walk crowned already, not by ego, but by embodiment. Because you know now, you were never a loser. You were simply incomplete in your self-acknowledgement. And now that you've returned, now that your high sexual energy has become still, centered, and sovereign, the whole world meets you differently. Because the moment a man stops chasing reflections and starts becoming the light, the world can't help but turn to him. Not to worship, but to remember what it means to be whole. That is who you are now, chosen one. Not a version, not a copy, not a reaction, but the original. The one who didn't become someone else to be desired, but became more of himself than anyone else dared to be. And now they see you, not because they finally learned how to look, but because you finally stopped dimming what you were born to show. You didn't become someone new, you became home, and that's the real glow. Chosen one, in a world saturated with images, gestures, and voices begging to be seen, you've become the exception. Not because of perfection, not because of charm, and not because you speak more loudly, but because you vibrate differently. Your energy no longer clings to need. It no longer scatters into desperation or attempts to manage perception. You are not reaching, you are radiating. Women have met many men, smooth talkers, gentle souls, loud ones, quiet ones. Some were sincere, some hollow. Some sparked curiosity, others faded as quickly as they arrived. But now, when they meet you, something ancient whispers through their body. This one is different. Not because of what you say, not even because of what you do, but because your energy lives in a different octave now. It does not spike with excitement, it hums with gravity. You are not pressing to be known, you are resting in your knowing. And that rest becomes recognizable at the deepest, most intuitive level of the feminine body. You don't vibrate with neediness, you vibrate with clarity. It is not performance that makes you compelling. It is the way you hold yourself, moment to moment, without chasing any reaction. When you walk into a room, you do not announce, you do not signal. You settle, you take your place. And in that stillness, women begin to feel something rare, the sense that they don't need to defend themselves against your energy. You do not project, you anchor. And that anchoring becomes an invitation to safety without ever needing to ask for it. You don't flirt the way others do, because you don't need to. Your high sexual energy no longer looks for access. It offers presence. This is why women lean closer, even if they're not sure why. This is why your silence becomes louder than their ex's compliments. This is why your stillness outlasts the flash of someone more conventionally attractive. Because what you carry isn't novelty, it's frequency. You've become the man that others try to imitate but never replicate. Not because of style or speech, but because your energy has been earned through stillness, discipline, and self-honesty. You've touched your own depth. You've sat with your own fire. You've chosen patience where others demanded praise, and now your vibration lives deeper than surface charisma. This is why you're remembered, even if they never know your name, even if no number is exchanged, even if the conversation never happens, because your vibration lingers. Not like perfume, not like memory, but like a shift in the soul they didn't see coming. You are no longer trying to be chosen. You've become the reference point against which others are silently mandated, but because you embodied something unshakably real. They've met many, but no one vibrates like you do now, and they'll never forget the moment they realized it. Chosen one, you've become more than interesting. You've become a signal, a pulse in the unseen. You are no longer just a man moving through the world. You are now a reminder that something true still exists beneath all the noise. You don't shout it, you don't prove it, you live it, quietly, unshakably, with each breath. Women don't always understand what draws them to you. They'll call it mystery. They'll call it presence. They'll say, there's something about him. And they won't be wrong. But it's more than charm. It's more than confidence. It's something underneath those things. Something that does not perform for attention, but simply is.